The Blue Jackets have had success drafting one Jiricek. Could they add another in the upcoming draft? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank you all for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also love to know before we get started that today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. If you ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise, well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Doing another prospect profile, Tony Ferrari is back, and we're talking about Adam Jiricek today, who was supposed to go top 5 until he got a knee injury. Finished his season, so we're talking about, should we be worried about that? Where will he go in the draft? Could the Blue Jackets use a second Jiricek brother? All of that fun stuff. So I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Tony. Obviously, we talked with Tony Ferrari yesterday, all about Anton Slayev. Today, we're doing another defenseman, maybe a little familiar to Blue Jackets fans. And this one I'm really interested in because this is a guy that we were talking about potentially being a top 5 pick this time last year. Gets a knee injury, finishes his season, and now he has plummeted down draft board. So we've got Tony Ferrari back, and we're going to talk about Adam Jiricek today. Younger brother of David Jiricek, has some similarities in his game, but is also just a really kind of exciting player on his own. So I guess let's start off with kind of the basics about Jiricek. What kind of player is he? And it's like, especially kind of as compared to his brother, because that's kind of the baseline that we have for Jiricek being pretty familiar with David over the last couple of years.
Well, I think Adam Jiricek's a really interesting player. He has a lot of similarities to his brother, but he's not quite the same player. I think his defensive game is a little bit more refined. The one thing with David is he has a little bit of a psychopath factor to his game. So we see him go and chase some stuff and do some silly things from time to time. He goes and lays some massive hits, and I think Blue Jackets fans love it, and they're going to love it when it gets to the NHL level full time. With Adam, I think it's a little bit more refined. It's a little bit more positionally based defensive game. And I think the one thing that we didn't see with Adam this year was the offensive game really start to flourish. I think at the Czech men's level, you saw him flash it every once in a while, but it wasn't really coming out the way David's was in his draft year. I think with David, he was a little bit more physically mature at that age, so he was able to kind of use his physicality and manhandle guys and go ahead with the puck and be a little bit more confident. Whereas with Adam, he's a little bit more reserved, more refined, passive, but it's all there. Like, you see so many flashes of it. For me, he's at number 12 on my board, higher than a guy like Anton Slayev, who we talked about yesterday, but he brings a lot of the same defensive things that you look for in a blue liner. I think he's able to kill the rush. He's able to disrupt cycles pretty easily. He's a really good skater. In the knee injury, everyone's concerned about it. I can comfortably say I've talked to his agent, Alan Walsh. He said he's going to be ready for development camp in the summer, so he should be ready to go shortly right after the draft. In all honesty, he probably could be on the ice sooner. It's going to be about getting this kid fully healthy for next season. Is he going to jump into the AHL next year? Probably not. But you don't have to worry about that. He's a guy that you can let be a little bit slower burn, because you're going to be able to get him a little bit later, I think, than some teams would expect, especially coming into the year where, like you said, he was a guy that people were talking about in the top 5. So while he's fallen down, and I've seen him as low as early second round on some boards, for me, he's a top 15 guy, because we look at all the defensemen in this draft, and I think for me, for my money, Adam Jiricek is the guy that has the most refined defensive game, and the offensive potential is still very much there.
More from my conversation with Tony in just a minute, but first I want to tell you about Ultimate Hockey GM. If you're dreaming of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise, do you think you could run the Blue Jackets better than Don Waddell? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons and lead it to glory, hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Blue Jackets fan, you know there is no off-season. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love the game. It's completely free, playable offline. You can play it on the go. You can play it as you want and when you want to. And Locked On listeners are going to get a free 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Yeah, it's really enticing kind of as a Blue Jackets fan to get the brother of an already pretty good defensive prospect, and just have those guys in the organization together. I know the Blue Jackets are big on kind of familiarity in their drafting, obviously taking Fantilli and Brindley and then Whitelaw and Strathman in the same draft. They love to get guys from similar from the same teams, etc. Obviously, there's the we talked about the Russian factor last episode. We're talking about the injury factor this episode, air quotes. It's kind of been a similar thing with Caden Lindstrom, where people are like, "Oh, the injury is a worry, and that's why he's dropping down people's draft boards." Is it just the injury factor? Is it like, obviously there's a small sample size for Jiricek? If he was available at 36th, then the Blue Jackets take him. I feel like you take that and run. But how kind of impactful are you expecting that injury factor to be in the draft?
For me, it's not that big of a deal, to be completely honest, and maybe that's a bit of a cop-out. But in my mind, I look at it and I go, this isn't 2000. This isn't 1990. A knee injury isn't detrimental to a player's career anymore. The advancements in medicine are insane, and maybe the fact that some NHL front offices haven't hired a guy that was born since 1965 or something, they don't really realize how advanced the medical world is now. So I think you're looking at a guy who had a messed up knee and got surgery and it's fully fixed and functional now. Yes, he's going to need some time to build up strength, but this isn't a career-ending injury. You look back in the 70s, 80s, when you and I weren't around, those guys' injuries, when this happens, they're done. That's the end of their career. Then now they got to go work at the peanut butter shop or whatever they do, become a mailman and do the things. Now guys take 6 months off, rehab, work through the surgery and the building up of strength and get back to it. And they're as good or better as they have ever been. I think we all forget Connor McDavid's rookie season was cut short by barreling into a wall and messing up his knee and then going, "Don't worry, I don't need surgery. I'm just going to rehab it." He leads the league every year in scoring. And I'm not saying Adam Jiricek is him.
I know it sounds like that's what you're saying, and you heard it here first.
Adam Jiricek will lead the league. David. Yeah, Adam Jiricek will collect multiple scoring titles in the NHL. No, but no, these things happen now, and medical advancements are worlds better than they used to be. So I don't think the injury factor is nearly what it used to be.
I guess the question would be, how has this kind of impacted his development timeline? So last week, I think, or maybe the week before, I talked to Sam Gilligan about Michael Haig of the Steel, and obviously he suffered that huge injury in his, I believe it was D-1 year, and that really kind of impacted his kind of development timeline going forward. So are you expecting kind of, obviously we talked about, you're not expecting Adam Jiricek to be in the AHL at 18 like his brother was, but are you kind of expecting maybe it's going to take an extra year for him to kind of hit to be ready for the NHL? Or do you think, again, we talked about, he's young, he'll bounce back. Is this something that he can kind of make up the time with a couple of really intense summers of training? Or is this something where he's going to be a project player and it's maybe, 2 or more years before we see him in North America?
I think realistically, Adam Jiricek is as far away as the rest of the top defensemen in this draft class. 2 years probably at least. And yeah, like if he's in the Czech men's league for another year, able to get comfortable, stay home, rehab, do all the things he needs to do, and then he comes to the AHL at 19 instead of 18, I think you're still golden because you're still getting this guy in the system in your AHL affiliate a year sooner than any CHL you're going to draft. You go out and you get Sam Dickinson or Zane Perek, they're going to be in the OHL for the next couple of years anyways. You don't have to worry about it. He's going to be there at 19 probably. He'll be able to kind of do his thing. I'm just looking now at his contract status. And yeah, he's good to come over whenever, basically. So I think it's going to be a situation where plays one more year in the Czech men's league and then comes over after that.
In terms of he gets drafted this summer, NHL teams are going to take a look and be like, right, okay, we want you to work on this specific thing. Is it just a case of keep rehabbing the knee, keep getting stronger, or is there anything kind of like in his game that you think an NHL team is really going to grab onto and be like, you need to improve this before you're ready to sign your ALC?
I think the big thing is just going to be keep getting stronger and rehab that knee, and then I think it's just going to be, hey, play with some aggression. Like, watch your brother play. You have all of the same tools. Don't do some of the things that cause him to get some penalties from time to time, but see the aggression he plays with, see the bravado he plays with, and just be willing to do that against men. And I think that just comes with maturity at the end of the day. So I think that's really what they're going to kind of drill into Adam this summer.
Yeah. Like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes, because I think it's one of those situations where some teams will have faith in their kind of their ability to, I guess, like the faith in their ability of like the medical team or the player development team or whatever to kind of get this kid up to his full potential, and then some teams will be like, no, we don't want to touch that because we could draft Sam Dickinson, for example, who does not have the injury history, and just kind of deal with it. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes. Again, this feels like a pretty... The Blue Jackets, I don't think, will have a pick in the range for Adam Jiricek, or they probably shouldn't. Again, like I said, if he's there at 36 and they take him, that feels like a Brindley level steal, like getting him at, they got Brindley at 34 last year, which feels, incredible to me. I don't think they'll have a pick available kind of in the range that Jiricek will be kind of on the board and gone. But he does feel like a Blue Jackets pick. And maybe I'm just saying that because we have his brother and there's some similarities there. But this feels like a system where, the development team is good. It's a solid development team. And I feel like Jiricek, the second, could really thrive in an organization like Columbus.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, like you said, the Blue Jackets don't really have a pick in that range. Their second rounder is in Philly now, so they don't have that pick. So they're picking at 4th overall and then 69th overall. So unless there's a trade where Patrick Laine goes out the door, as much as you don't necessarily want to see it, it seems like a kind of a sure thing at this point. And a late first round pick comes back. Maybe that's the pick you get with an Adam Jiricek with. But unfortunately, I think he's going to be a guy that goes a little too late for that 4th overall pick and a little too early for that 69th overall pick.
Going to finish up my conversation with Tony in just a second, but first I want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors does everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, so you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. They've got all the parts you need at the prices you want, so it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. I will say that the second round pick is conditional, so they can decide whether they want to keep it or not after I think it's after day one of the draft, after the first round is over. So I guess they're going to see, is anyone available that they really want, and if no one kind of is available, then they'll probably give it to Philly. But I don't know. But it's theoretically in play. So like he could be available at that range. There's a bunch of guys that I like at that range, but getting Jiricek there would be fun. We talked a little bit last episode about Caden Lindstrom and how he would be potentially your pick at 4th overall. He was who I picked in the Locked On mock draft. We went Celebrity, Demidov, Levshinov, Lindstrom at 4th overall, which felt like a gimme to me. We don't have to talk about how much you like that pick, which was going to be my plan if you had someone else in mind at 4th. But I want to talk a little bit more about potentially Lindstrom at 4th overall. I saw a comparison kind of as of the time earlier today, as of the time of recording this. Someone compared him to kind of a Quinton Byfield type player. Is that? And I don't necessarily think that comparisons are the most helpful, but if you get a Quinton Byfield out of a guy like Caden Lindstrom, like I would be extremely happy with that pick. Is that kind of something like, is that comparison something that you can see?
Yeah, I think it is something I can see. I've said it before, and I'll say it here now. I think it's almost a foil of Quinton Byfield. Quinton Byfield is a bit more of a playmaker. Caden Lindstrom plays a similar style of game, but he's a bit more of a goal scorer. So I think there's the similar elements in the way they get around the ice, the way they're going to excel in transition. The way they might be better on the wing, at least to start their career, the way Quinton Byfield's found a home on Anze Kopitar's wing. But I think down the line, they're both centers. I think down the line, they're both high-impact offensive players. I know a guy that when I spoke to Caden Lindstrom, and I think he said it at the Combine too, Rupe Hintz is a guy that he looks to as the kind of guy that he models his game after. And I think that's the kind of player you're going to get with a guy like Caden Lindstrom, a guy that plays fast, plays up the middle of the ice, wants to create offensively at all times, and has some really good playmaking ability still too. So I think that's the kind of guy you're getting with a Caden Lindstrom. And I think at the end of the day, if, like I said, I think we talked about it yesterday, if you're getting him to play behind Adam Fantilli, you have your 2 top 6 centers for the next 10 to 15 years, really, I think. And then you go from a franchise that has been desperately looking for a franchise center to a franchise that possibly has 2. So it's a good situation for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, there's a situation where after this draft, the Blue Jackets center depth is Fantilli, Lindstrom, Sillinger, Voronkov. Mm-hmm. And that's like center depth, the likes of which we have never seen in this organization. So like, that's really enticing. And it feels like specifically with Lindstrom, like the worst case scenario here is he is a winger for Adam Fantilli.
Yeah.
Oh no. How terrible.
I know, right? It's interesting because I think last year when you had me on the show, we were talking a little bit about Fantilli, and I said that if the Blue Jackets get Fantilli, which they did, there's a very good chance he is the best center in franchise history within 5 or 6 years. With Caden Lindstrom coming in, I think there's a realistic shot that 10 years from now, we're looking at this team and we go, these are the 1 and 2 best centers this franchise has ever had. And the Blue Jackets are a franchise that hasn't always had
low, but also
they haven't had great centers necessarily over the years, but still having both of them at the same time, they could be real difference maker for the Blue Jackets going forward.
Yeah. And I don't think Penguins fans listen to this show, but if they are, calm down. I'm not comparing these players directly, but it feels a little bit like the Blue Jackets have a chance to get their Crosby and Malkin.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm comparing Adam Fantilli directly to Sidney Crosby, and I stand by that, and you can quote me on that.
Adam Fantilli and Caden Lindstrom, who's better, them or Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl?
Yeah, and that's another thing, and again, we're not comparing these players directly, but back-to-back drafts, I believe, was Draisaitl and McDavid. Back-to-back drafts, Crosby and Malkin. You see it in Chicago. Obviously, Kane wasn't a center, but back-to-back drafts, they got Taves and Kane. That feels like there's potential here for the Blue Jackets to get those 2 cornerstones of the forward core, and then you add guys like Jiricek, Matejchuk, who I'm really high on, especially seeing him play at the AHL level for a very small sample size. Like, I'm tempering my expectations. That's been the theme of this offseason, is we're tempering our expectations, but I'm really excited about the steps that this organization has been taking, and I don't know, I'm quietly optimistic for the future of this franchise.
Yeah, it's the Blue Jackets have the potential to be in a really good spot going forward. I think it's a really exciting time, like you said. I think for all of Yarmo's faults, he brought in a lot of good young players in recent years. And now that Don Waddell is under the helm, now he gets a chance to kind of bring some of those things that made Carolina such a competitive franchise with a limited budget to the Blue Jackets. And he's going to be able to do it and have a little bit more room to wiggle, a little bit younger roster to try to build up exactly what he sees. And although they had Aho there and some other players, he really could have two building blocks down the middle that he's never really had before in Fantilli and Caden Lindstrom, or Fantilli and Berkeley Catton, or whoever they end up drafting at this 4th overall pick. I think it'd be really interesting to see what he can do with two guys down the middle that he can build around, with a guy like Kent Johnson playing on one of their wings, with guys like David Jiricek and others kind of working up that back end. You mentioned Matejchuk. He's a guy that could be a killer on the power play. Like, there's a lot to work with in the Blue Jacket system. So it's going to be really interesting because they've got a good young team already. They're building towards something, and it's going to be fun to see because the talent there, it makes you really happy, because even a guy like Cole Sillinger, if he can slot in as your third line center, I think that puts him in a spot that's a little bit more easy to succeed for him.
Yeah, for sure. I want to finish off real quick here with talking a little bit about last year's draft. We don't have to go too much into detail about it, but a year on, how is the draft looking for the Blue Jackets? Because obviously at the time we were all kind of amazed. Is it still looking solid in your opinion? Obviously Fantilli kind of was exactly what we thought he was going to be, and potentially more. Brindley had a great season. Whitelaw, I think, struggled but found his way eventually. How do you think the Blue Jackets 2023 draft looks a year on?
I think it looks really good. I think you look at guys like Fantilli obviously came in, was pretty much as advertised. Unfortunately, the injury shortened his season. He wasn't able to really get into the Calder conversation or really build off some of the things he did early in the year. And I think some of the instability of that roster and the coaching change that just happened will kind of help that, I think. But solidifying his role with this team is going to be a really big, important thing for next year. And then, like you said, up and down the lineup, I think Luke Pinelli had a wicked year in Ottawa for a team that wasn't all that good. I remember talking to him earlier this year, and I think at one point he had 12 goals and 1 assist. And I jokingly asked him, I'm like, hey, you just decided not to pass this year? What's going on? He goes, well, I got the shot and no one's open, so I take it. He's a fun kid. He's got some fun personality. I think he's a really good player. I thought that getting him at 114th overall,
pick, I believe.
Yeah, it's just crazy value. Andrew Strathman was a great swing. I think he's a guy that you look at the package and you just leave it and let it be. And you let him see what he develops into, and he's could be a really good player. And then, like you said, William Whitelaw, Gavin Brindley, 2 players who I think are undersized and really skilled. Gavin Brindley specifically, I thought, showed everyone why he should have been a top 20 pick last year and not a second rounder. I think he's a guy that when he went to the World Juniors, he was a leader, he was a producer, he was a difference maker there. With Michigan all season long, he was a difference maker. He was a guy that was really pushing that team to the next level and got them as far as he did with that Michigan team this year. So I think personally that draft still looks really good. The picks later on, like Oivo Keskinen and Melvin Strahl, we'll see what happens with those guys. Those guys are late round picks. A Tyler Peddle, who was the last pick in the draft, if I'm not mistaken. I thought that was great value for that pick. There's something there. It's going to be interesting to see how this draft class develops, because we could be looking back at this draft class and going, man, I can't believe they got 3 guys out of it. I can't believe they got 4 guys out of it. And they're all impact players up and down this lineup. So it's going to be fun to see, because I think they did a really good job in 2023 and just built on a solid 2022 and even a good 2021. So I think it's going to be fun to see this team grow in the next few years.
Yeah, they've got a good streak going at the draft. Let's see if they can continue that. If people want to learn more about prospects, any of the guys that we talked about in this episode, or any guys that they just want to learn a little bit more about, where can they find you and your work online, Tony?
All the draft prospects we talked about, you can find in my final 2024 draft rankings. It's pinned to my Twitter. You can go to @TheTonyFerrari and find it there, or go to thehockeynews.com and just search my last name, Ferrari, in the search bar, and it'll be right on there as well. I did a top 100. The top 50 all has scouting reports, and the top 32 have really detailed reports. Some of the best, in my opinion, some of the best stuff you'll get for free online. Not to toot my own horn, but it's a lot of fun. It's a big draft process, and it's the stuff I start putting in work on July 1st, basically, for the next year's draft cycle. And even already at this point, I've already started looking at next year's guys. So it's always a fun process, a long process, but it's very much worth it because it lets me talk to people like you, and I always have fun with these.
Well, we always enjoy having you on the show. And again, can confirm that Tony's draft stuff is some of the best stuff out there. So go and check it out, guys. And that's all I've got for today. I will be back on Monday with more Blue Jackets talk. There's all kinds of rumors floating around, so I'm sure we'll address some of them. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter and on Instagram. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube and on SiriusXM. Thank you once again for listening, and until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.